Carry on, fellow Supernatural fans. We're back here. Supernatural Revisited, presented by Haddonfield and Beyond. We're on to episode number 2, Wendigo. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend Tommy B, who's returned to regular content here on Haddonfield and Beyond, which I guess is really your beginning of regular content here, because before we were Fandom Empire.
Is the same channel. It was literally a rename. Did you? Oh, it was censored. I caught that. Oh, okay. I see what you did there.
What was censored?
Oh, it looked like you flipped me off, but the screen blurred it.
No, I went to drink.
Okay.
He's accusing me of flipping me off. We're already at odds, just like Sam and Dean in this episode.
Here we go.
Here we go. So for me, Wendigo feels a lot like a lot of horror movies. The movie I would compare it to the most, man, is Friday the 13th, the remake, which conveniently stars Jared Padalecki in the lead role. Very similar setting and feel. The way it's shot's fantastic. Obviously, a cheaper episode to shoot because they're in the woods for most of it. They were very, very fortunate enough to get a certain somebody back for this episode, which we'll get to shortly. But the crux of this episode is they found coordinates in the last episode. Jessica obviously dies on the ceiling. By the way, episode 1's obviously up on the channel, so please head on over, check that out. Like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all. Your engagement on these videos will help push the videos out to more people, which is important. But we're going to keep doing these regardless because this is a passion project for us. So hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully we get some people that maybe are on the fence about trying Supernatural to try Supernatural. We've had a pretty decent success rate at doing that. So really looking forward to that and seeing how many people we can get to do that. But man, the crux of this episode, as I was mentioning, Sam and Dean are going to look for Dad, who has gone missing on a hunting trip and he hasn't come home yet. And they end up in Colorado. And, this episode has a much younger, familiar face that we'll get to momentarily. But the whole episode is really they're looking for their dad, and a brother and sister are looking for their brother who has gone missing, whose whole opening sequence feels like a scene out of the Friday the 13th remake, funny enough. Seriously, if you haven't watched that movie, go watch that movie, then go watch Wendigo from Supernatural, and it's crazy how similar it is. But also, in the funny similarities here, man, not only does it feel like the Friday the 13th remake with Jared Padalecki, we get the big mine shaft, bit at the end, which feels like Jensen Ackles and My Bloody Valentine. So a little bit of foreshadowing there with the future feature debuts for not debuts, but future feature movies for Jared and Jensen. The details behind the episode, starring Jensen Ackles, Jared Padalecki, and co-star, believe it or not, Alden Ehrenreich. That's right. The young man in this episode that Sam partners with at the end is Alden Ehrenreich, future Han Solo, directed by David Nutter. That's right. The pilot expert himself was able to come back and do episode 2. Maybe that's why episode 2 hits so damn good. This one was written by Eric Kripke and a couple of other individuals. I forgot to edit that in, though, so that is my fault, and I will make up for that in the comment section at some point in time. The rating for it was 5.01 million, and it aired on September the 20th, 2005. Man, I don't know.
Back in the day.
What was Tommy B doing on September 20th, 2005?
Probably in elementary school, maybe middle school.
I was very deep into high school. So, yeah, very much so. Wendigo, initial impressions, man. I just watched this thing last night at about 3 o'clock in the morning. What did you think of it?
The horror feel is definitely strong with this one. I mean, especially the early Supernatural seasons, that's something that's pretty consistent a lot of the time. It's more horror spooky. I feel like this episode in particular really gets us started on the monster of the week scheme. We had that last week, with the previous episode, the pilot, but we also had a lot more going on in the pilot, and that kind of detracts from it a little bit. So this is the first one where you're really getting sucked in my opinion, and they do a darn good job of it. What's a Wendigo? No one friggin' knows. Probably before 2005, who's ever heard of a Wendigo? I don't think I ever did before this show. So
David Nutter, Eric Kripke, and company take a classic horror movie trope for the successful ones, anyway. And you hear all about the Wendigo in this episode, and it's out there, and you get to hear it. But in terms of its on-screen presence, it's barely in the episode. And when I think of like classics that calls back to Halloween 78, John Carpenter's original, Jaws, Star Wars A New Hope, Darth Vader. Like those things are sometimes when an episode is or a movie is constructed properly, you can still have your monster be scary without having them do bloodbaths through an entire episode or an entire movie. Suspense is a big thing, and it's done so well in this episode.
That's a whole nother thinker, right? Because that's something that we don't always give a whole lot of thought to. How much screen time did this monster actually get? And it might honestly be very, very minimal.
Less than a minute,
thinker.
maybe.
It's a
maybe
thinker.
Less than a minute, 2 at the most.
It's a thinker. It gives you suspense. That's really what drives this episode forward. It's not the actual monster. It's the thriller element of it.
No, for sure. And again, the cast is fantastic. I will say this: Sam and Dean do a lot better job of selling roles they're impersonating in later episodes and later scenes. In this one, they're claiming to be park rangers and they're going out on a hike, and they don't look like they fit the role at all. And it gets called out too, which is fun.
That's something I really like about the old school Supernatural episodes, the early stuff, is they are not the Sam and Dean Winchester of legend yet among the hunter community. They are Sam and Dean Winchester, two little shits who are looking for their daddy. And no one knows a thing about them except for Bobby Singer, who we'll see later this season, I believe. It's amazing. It's amazing to go back in time like this, knowing what Sam and Dean Winchester end up becoming, getting recognized as, and seeing them start from square one. I really enjoy it.
I love that the brother and the sister, whose names are eluding me, they bring like their expert with them, who's hunted bears and stuff, and he has no idea how in over his head he is, and like Dean's just getting annoyed with him, but Sam is so pissed off because of what happened last episode with Jessica that he almost full on comes out and says it's a Wendigo. Obviously that gets revealed eventually, but like even like throughout it, the fella ends up dying because he doesn't listen to Sam and Dean. And he runs off and goes to try to take on the Wendigo himself, gets his neck snapped. And it's just, he has the remark, "Ooh, you want me to stay in your magic circle?" Well, buddy, you probably should have stayed in the magic circle because it didn't end well for you.
So you got Haley and Ben.
Haley and
they
Ben
are looking for Tommy. That's who they're looking for.
Haley and Ben. Well, they find Tommy, and I remember the first time I saw this episode, I was stunned that Tommy was still alive. I thought for sure they'd find him and he's dead, and it's more about Sam and Dean protecting them. But they end up finding Tommy at the end of the episode, and he's still alive, so that was cool. it's a different era, right? Like they have no cell service. Things aren't the way they are today. Um, One of my favorite bits in the episode too was when the Wendigo gets Dean. One, you get the little M&M product placement earlier on in the episode where Dean's like, "I'm good, I got these," and it's like forefront in the camera. No doubt there was some money involved there, but then he leaves the trail of M&Ms to help Ben and Sam find them. And Ben, played by Alden Ehrenreich, has a couple of moments in the episode where like he picks up on clues and notices and mentions it to Sam. And if there's one thing I can say about Supernatural, man, and we'll get into it the further we get into this season, is the guest stars have an opportunity to shine in episodes. They're not coming on to play cannon fodder like in a lot of TV series. They're coming on, it might be only be a one episode role, but they're coming on and the role that they're playing is usually significant and usually, they have some substance to their characters. And I every time Ben and sorry, what was her name?
So you had Haley,
Haley.
Ben, and then they're looking for their brother Tommy.
Yeah, so Haley and Ben, I thought, did a wonderful job in this episode, and it really does feel like a group search going out into a forest, trying to find people.
So, just from my cursory look, I was able to discover that there is a linked page for the actress for Haley. Her name is Gina Holden. She is a Canadian actress, went on to go do several other things. Ben, we all know Alden Ehrenreich, right? So definitely successful in his own part. Graham Wardle is the actor for Tommy. He doesn't seem to have a page linked here, but that doesn't necessarily mean he didn't go on to do anything. I'm just not familiar with him off the top of my head.
So Jared and Jensen were on Supernatural Now and Then podcast done by basically the Trickster and Chuck. It's a really fun podcast. I've been listening to mostly one a night when I can before bed, and I don't know who the hunter guy Haley and Ben brings with them is, but apparently he had a pretty big Hollywood career at one point and was in something significant that like Jared was like really like he really wanted to ask him about it, but he didn't know how to approach him about it, and finally came out about some past role he'd been in that he really wanted to talk to him about. Apparently, the guy was super approachable, and the one thing you hear about Supernatural is Jared and Jensen had the sets, whether it was on location or later on when they had their own built sets for too long, in my opinion. Um, they made it feel like a home for cast and crew, and there wasn't a lot of drama, and it was a fun place to be. And let me tell you, in Hollywood, it's really hard to find a environment like that. You also mentioned that Haley's a Canadian actress. Well, shooting in Canada, there's Canadian bylaws. You have to use a significant amount of Canadian talent in your shows, so it limits your ability to get certain people. Not that they can't have American guest stars, they can, but there's certain restrictions on how many you can, how much Canadian talent you have to use. Very, very interesting laws in place there. And often you'll see a Supernatural star guest star as someone else much later in the series. I don't believe this happens with either of those two, but who would have thought that Alden Ehrenreich would go on to play Han Solo?
Yeah, that's definitely a twist, and you would have never guessed because it's quite a few years later. But, having said all that, it's ultimately a really powerful episode, right? I mean, all the twists, the turns, you get to see another side of Dean, more flirtatious Dean. She goes at the end, "How can I make it up to you?" Just making the looks, right? Classic Dean Winchester right there for you.
It's such a good episode, and yet there's not a lot to it. And for me, it's a classic example of sometimes less is more. You don't need to have these massive convoluted episodes with sweeping turns. This episode is really five people going out into the forest looking for two people. Well, they don't find John, but they do find Tommy, and I'm not talking about that Tommy. Um, and like that's all you needed. Like David Nutter took very like, and this is a cheap episode to shoot, by the way. When you compare everything they got going on in the pilot, much bigger budget for the pilot, to an episode like this, dude. This is a run of the mill, super cheap episode that you can do. And you know, people need to understand when you're shooting a 22 episode season, like you're given a budget, and that budget gets allocated across several episodes, and usually the episodes with the biggest budget are the most important episodes. And I'm not saying Wendigo is one of the most important episodes, but you have your pilot. If you follow up the pilot with a weak episode 2, say like Bugs from later this season, which we'll get to, um, all of a sudden the interest begins to die down massively. They didn't do that, man. They followed the pilot up with a banger. If you're a horror fan, you had horror elements, suspense elements. You keep calling it a thriller and a thinker episode, which I think is spot on. I just really appreciate the way that they approached this episode. And Sam in this episode for me, sorry, my TV keeps going on and off. Sam in this episode for me is a really big part of it because you're not getting the same guy that was on the hunt for the woman in white in episode 1. They easily could have been like, okay, well, yeah, you know, his girlfriend died or whatever, but he's going to play the role just like he did in episode 1. He doesn't. Jared plays this role much different in episode 2 than he does in episode 1. And to me, that adds such believability to what's going on. It adds, drama and trauma to the characters and in between Sam and Dean. To have that kind of awareness in a show like this, it's not like this big tent pole blockbuster show, just really adds to the quality of it, in my opinion.
The death is really exciting. Seeing them kill the Wendigo with a flare gun. That that was something special right there. You know, Supernatural has quite a history of making some unique and exciting deaths. And to see, you know, we need to use a flame, have a flare gun, have a flare. That was pretty exciting. I don't want to say it was necessarily original because I just don't know that for certain, and I'm sure it's not. But it was definitely something that I'm sure was unexpected for viewers back in the day.
I like the call out that the Wendigo does in order to lure them in, like smart enough to be able to do something like that. It sounds just like a human. And I like the lore behind it. That, you know, there could be more out there, and it's presented in such a unique way. The journal comes into play again, obviously. The journal's such a big part of the earlier seasons, but like for your second episode of a season, of a series even, you're using that journal as like a plot tool to be like, hey, this is how we know all this stuff. It really helps the viewer of the episode understand what's going on too, and understand how Sam and Dean know so much about what's going on. Again, the lighting in the episode, the way the episode's shot, is done very well. To me, they shot the forest so well, man. I don't know if you've been hiking in a forest or not. I've gone hiking in a forest. I've gotten lost. I actually got lost with Johnny, who's been on this channel and will be on this show before, or in the future, but he's been on this channel before, pardon me. We got lost in a forest. And this episode does a really good job of making you feel like, oh, you know, one wrong turn and these guys are going to be lost.
You know, when I think back to times I've been hiking in forests and different areas I've been, I can definitely see how it would be easy to get lost, especially if you are kind of going off the beaten path a little bit. You generally have like what these areas that these are a little more well planned out. These are the areas you should stick to. But then if you go to those areas where it's like, I don't know, maybe you should stay away from there. It gets tricky. And definitely in an episode like this, you're seeing stuff get a little crazy, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
the forest scene adds not scenery. It adds more to that mystery element. Definitely.
So at the end of each one of these episodes, we have three categories that we like to go to. We like to talk about our favorite scene. We like to talk about if it was a Sam or a Dean episode, and then we score the episode out of 10. Favorite scene, man. I'm gonna put you on the spot first here. I went last time. What's your favorite scene?
That's a very good question. What's my favorite scene? Honestly, if I have to think back to what's most memorable about this, it's seeing the early Sam and Dean try to present themselves. So they are at Haley and Ben's door trying to say, hey, we're park rangers. Hey, oh, is that your car? Nice car. You know, it's 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 comical, but it's classic. So it's not the Wendigo that stays with me. This is the early Sam and Dean. They are portraying themselves as these, various authorities that they're going to pretend to be, and they're not doing a very good job at it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. For me, it's something I referenced earlier in the episode. Sam's getting so pissed off at the fella that Ben and Haley have brought with them that he almost spills the bean. You're never supposed to spill the beans about what's really going on. That's one of the rules of the job. You don't tell other people what's actually going on. But he's so worked up from everything that's happened, how the episode started. Obviously, the loss he went through at the end of the last episode, how much his life's been turned upside down, and just the conversation him and Dean have, and Dean being like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And like, um, again, the two of those brothers together. I could say that it's a bunch of the Wendigo stuff, or some of the deaths, or the beginning of the episode, or the stuff in the mine shaft. The effects were cool for 2005, getting shot with a flare gun, and feels very suspenseful there. But the impact of that Sam and Dean scene, I think, is important because again, it really signified that hey, we're only on episode 2, and this character is not being presented the same way it was in episode 1 because of the trauma he's continuing to go through, and I really appreciated that. That's commitment to storytelling. It's commitment from on Jared's part, and yeah, and that sort of leads me into who's my MVP of the episode because I thought Dean took the pilot. I thought Jared took this episode. Dean gets captured. Jared acts alongside young, old, and Ehrenreich, and he doesn't miss a beat, man. It's very good in this episode. It's a Sam episode for me.
I don't know, man. I'm disagreeing with you. I think this is more of a Dean episode. You see him shine a little more. He gets the kill. He not really gets the girl, but gets the girl kind of. Not really. You really see him shine in this episode a little more. And so I was all about giving this episode to Dean.
So we got opposites on the episodes, and I'm logging them here on a notepad somehow. My phone, which is still at 1%, as everybody can see, is still surviving.
It's been at 1% for like 2 episodes, but
I
okay.
know it's crazy. It's just nuts. But yeah, so you went with Dean in our last episode. Sorry, you went with Sam in the pilot. Oh, you went with Sam in the pilot in episode 1. And I went with Dean, and we did the opposite for Wendigo. So that's cool. Rating the episodes out of 10. I'm gonna give Wendigo. Oh man, it's so tough because now we've set a baseline. You gave the pilot a 7. I gave the pilot a 7.5. Or sorry, 7.7. If I'm gonna give the Wendigo something, I'm gonna give Wendigo like a 9, man, because it comes across exactly like a horror movie, but it's an episode of TV.
Really? You're giving Wendigo better than the pilot?
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it much more than the pilot.
That's a tough call, man, because I'm questioning what is it about these episodes that I'm enjoying more? Is it the nostalgia feel? Is it that this sets up Supernatural for it to be supernatural? Or is it the episode as itself? I guess if I'm being fair, I should really rate the episode by itself and not in comparison to the whole series, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I think for me, I approach it a season at a time, right? You will be eventually comparing it to the whole series as we give ratings for every episode, but we're not at those other episodes yet. We're doing episode 2, right? So you do really got to think ahead as if there's other things that you like in season 1 better, because you won't be able to go back and choose your score and or change your score, pardon me. But I'm a horror movie fan, and you mentioned Monster of the Week. Well, this is about as good as Monster of a Week gets, with the
You are
exception of one
right.
more episode this season that I think does it better.
You have a good point there. I think I'll give this episode an 8.
An 8 for Tommy B. Send me that, dude, because my phone finally just died. I'll have to add it to the notes when it charges. So a 9 from me, an 8 from Tommy B. That means both of us were in agreement on Wendigo being better than the pilot. The question for all of you, though, is it a Sam or Dean episode? What's your favorite scene? And score the episode out of 10 for us. Comment down below and share your thoughts there. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all so you're updated on future episodes. YouTube's funny about not sending notifications, so make sure you set them all to all. We'll eventually get a Facebook group up for this thing as we go. Probably just be a small little one that we post the episodes in, and maybe people can post some questions in there or suggestions or whatnot. But for Tommy B, I'm Sean. This is a lot of fun. Looking forward to next week, Dead in the Water. But until then, we got work to do.